Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a truly kind introduction. I'm grateful. I am so delighted to be here tonight. I want to start by telling you a secret. As Elizabeth mentioned, I have had the honor of serving on Rhodes Scholar selection committees for over a decade, so I can tell you with some amount of authority how selection decisions are really made. Sorry, Elizabeth, I didn't tell you this is what I was going to say. We spend a great deal of time trying to understand who the people are who have applied for this scholarship, what motivates them, what's their character, how do they approach problems, how do they think, how do they lead. In short, although every single one of them comes in with a well-articulated plan about how they are going to change the world, the secret, we largely ignore that. We select the person, not the plan. Why do we do it this way? If we are a scholarship that wants to encourage people to make a positive difference in the world, then shouldn't we at least strongly consider the plans that they have to do this? Perhaps if we could ensure that those plans would actually be followed, that would be a really good idea. But actually, we know that these plans almost always change, because we were candidates once too, and let me tell you, those paths do not look like the ones we had anticipated. Now, being a scientist, I like to back up such statements with hard data. So, when Elizabeth asked me to give this speech, I decided I would survey my Rhodes class and ask them if they had followed the career path that they laid out in their applications. Surely, some of them had, right? Wrong. It turns out that not a single person said that their career had unfolded exactly, or even almost exactly, according to plan. 67% of the classmates who responded to my survey said that they had followed their plans somewhat. And 33% responded that they had followed them not at all. I am an example of this career path not going according to plan myself. In my Rhodes essay, which this exercise caused me to dig out and reread recently, I painted a picture of how I would become a neuroscientist who would understand the mechanisms of neuroplasticity and use them to heal the brain from stroke. I wrote about how the inevitable next step in this pursuit of knowledge would be to come to Oxford and to work with the world's leading expert in neuroplasticity. Quoting now from that essay, I wrote confidently, "I plan to find evidence for the functionally useful taking over of vacated cortex after stroke, and to stimulate this process in people with brain damage to restore function and improve patient lives." It was a good plan. A solid story. I was going to unlock the human brain and then figure out how to heal it from injury. Indeed, it was a plan I would pursue for nearly a decade. I would complete that DPhil in Oxford and go on to learn new techniques to map the connections of the human brain and to stimulate these connections to try to encourage remapping after stroke. But what I didn't write in words in that essay, and what I didn't know, sitting where you are today, is what I would discover about myself along the way. It turned out that what was more important than the plan were the values in me, the person, that underlay that plan. And that making life and career choices consistent with those values are what would allow me to make a more positive impact in the world. The selection committee was able to see something that took me many years to see, that what I really valued was people, collaboration, relationships, and the tangible outcome that the work that I was doing was improving someone's life. But I struggled, even when I was at Oxford, honestly, because I felt such pressure to make a positive impact in the world, to live up to the scholarship and the immense privilege that I had been given. And I knew that the work that I was doing was really important and had the potential someday to change a great number of lives. But I just wasn't that happy doing it. My research was focused on the neurophysiological changes in the brain and not on the human experience and the impact of their illness and the hope of recovery. Something really important was missing for me. This person that was learning how much she valued connection and people and relationships. I would dream about going into clinical psychology, of having a career and a life that would have a positive impact on others in a time frame that I could experience. But was this selfish of me to put my own desires to really feel the impact of my work in my lifetime over the potential for large-scale impact on other people's lives in the future? If I did that, would I be squandering the Rhodes Scholarship? And could I really take this risk? Because making this change and doing it right would mean starting over completely. So it turns out in the United States, you can't become a psychologist without a doctorate in psychology. And so it would mean going back to school and getting a second PhD. What's more, I was keenly aware that with the raised profile of having been selected as a Rhodes Scholar, I was seen by many in my community as a role model for other women in science. And I was outright told on many occasions that this departure from a hard science like neuroscience to a soft science like psychology would be a failure. Even if I didn't see it that way, honestly not sure that I did or didn't, or if I decided I didn't care how other people saw it, the truth was that there was a really good chance that this plan could fail. That the outcome of this pivot in career wouldn't actually lead to enough happiness for me or enough positive outcomes for my patients, great enough to justify the 5 years that it would take to get there and the potential loss of scientific impact by leaving behind the work I had been pursuing. But there was just something in me that knew I had to do it. I had to do something I was truly passionate about that was aligned with who I was if I was going to have my distinctive contribution to the world. So after finishing my PhD at Oxford, and after 2 postdocs where I convinced myself that there surely was an easier way to do this, I decided to take the plunge, jumped off the planned pathway to try something different, something more aligned with who I was, to allow me to better help others. 5 years later, I became a clinical psychologist, opened up a private practice, and began doing research at the intersection of neuroscience and psychology. I loved my work. It poured out of me. I was now making career decisions based on what drove me, what brought me joy. And that passion, it helped make me a better scientist, a better clinician. It helped me have a more positive impact on others than I ever had before. And it allowed me in the years that followed to continue to make career choices based on this new framework of values that ultimately led me to taking another career change and finding a way finally to have both that tangible impact on people's lives now and a contribution to the future of scientific discovery on a grand scale. As Elizabeth mentioned, 2 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be offered a role as the founding executive director of the Schmidt Science Fellows program. And in this position, I'm responsible for building a global fellowship program aimed at advancing scientific discovery by investing in people. Early career scientists to help them make their own career changes and use interdisciplinary science to tackle the world's most pressing problems. So that's my story. But whether you're compelled more by the hard data or the anecdotal evidence, I hope that you will feel some real freedom in this knowledge that the trust invested in you, not in your plan. Because it frees you from doing exactly what you said you would do on paper. It frees you from the thoughts that I'm certain many of you are having right now, even tonight, even as you embark on your time at Oxford. What am I going to do next? How will I make my impact on the world? But what if instead of worrying about that plan right now, you spent some significant part of your Oxford days thinking deeply about who you are, how you derive your passion, and therefore what framework you will use to make those career and life decisions down the road? And then try that framework out here in Oxford. See if it feels right. Focus on how you will make that decision rather than what decision you will make. Which brings me to my next point: failure and the community that will be with you through it all. If you're going to solve big problems, you're going to have to try things that no one has ever tried before. You're going to have to take approaches that no one has ever thought of. And if you do that, you risk failure. You remember that survey I told you about? Well, it also revealed that 50% of my cohort said that they never really experienced failure before they started their Rhodes Scholarship. But every single one of us, 100%, had experienced failure by the time of the survey. Let that sink in. All of us failed. Some in ways that were spectacular, some ugly, and some mundane, but no less painful. And I know our class is not unique in that. I glossed over those 5 years of the second PhD, but the truth is there was a lot of doubt. There were many challenges, and there was certainly failure. There were times when I was sure I had made the wrong decision, times when it felt impossible to juggle life as a graduate student and the mom of 2 young children, times when it put significant pressure on relationships, and when I really just was not sure that I could do it. And in those times in particular, I was grateful to have a community behind me, supporting me, picking me up, and walking alongside of me. That community involved many important people in my life, not least of which my family. But it also included a large number of people that I met for the first time when I was sitting here in one of the seats that you are sitting in tonight. My Rhodes class was fortunate to have fostered a really close-knit community that has lasted for many years beyond our time at Oxford. If we could go back and do it again, we'd have focused even more on building those relationships with the people around us. I'm sure you've already realized that the Rhodes community is full of smart and successful people, and it's easy to connect on those levels. Honestly, some of the most fun that I've had in my lifetime were the intellectual debates that we would have over a pint at the Turf on a Tuesday evening. But what became much more important over a lifetime, what allowed me to take the professional and personal risks that led to my particular path of fighting the world's fight, was the capacity to truly know each other on a level far deeper than intellect, to know our values and our character, to know the flaws and the failures and the humanity of my Rhodes friends, and for them to know mine. You need to think about the future, yes. You need to soak up the wonderful intellectual experiences that you'll have at Oxford, of course. But first, embrace the possibilities of the relationships and the fellowship that are on offer here in this room. Because the trust is not only invested in you because they saw something special, but they also invested in every single scholar around you. Nobody knows what the future will hold for you. You don't even know what your contribution to standing up for the world will be quite yet. You might not need the 2 doctorates and several career changes that I took. I hope you don't. But you might take on personal and professional challenges even greater. Wherever you go and whatever you do, if you are willing to take a risk now with these people, I promise you, you will build your own community to support you to achieve so much more than you could imagine. So as you sit here this evening, in the surroundings of Milner Hall and Rhodes House, remember that secret I told you. And see if you can resist for a moment thinking about your plans for the term ahead, for your time at Oxford, for your life afterwards. And see if you can, just this once, not look at the horizon, but look in you and look around you. Thank you.